I want to talk for a moment about how we cover executions. It's a topic that's top of mind again after last week's unusual execution of Clayton Lockett in Oklahoma. The state of Oklahoma used a new, relatively unproven drug cocktail in last Tuesday's execution, leading to an unexpected result when the drugs were administered. The Tulsa World's Ziva Brandstetter was one of the media witnesses. Here she is talking about what made this execution different in her eyes.
The other executions I've covered were relatively seamless. To be honest, they lasted roughly 8 to 10 minutes. The inmates would sort of drift off to sleep. The color would drain from their face. They would make a snoring noise, and that was about it. This is very, very different from any other execution I witnessed.
Several members of the media appeared really shaken up as they returned back to tell what had happened.
Yeah.
Which took more than an hour, and normally it doesn't.
Yeah, there were several media witnesses who had not witnessed an execution before. We were all shaken up. It was very unsettling. He was clearly in pain, but several of them were quite shaken up.
When this story first broke, the headlines read like a bit of a bad joke. Execution halted after prisoner dies of a heart attack. Not exactly clear there that 2 men were supposed to be executed that night and that there was a stay issued after what happened to Lockett. What's most interesting to me about this story is the differences in how the national and international media covered it compared to some of the Oklahoma newspapers and TV stations, some of the storylines that came out there.
Well, and some of this is just natural. If you're looking at this story from an international or even a national perspective, it really is about the debate over capital punishment and the appropriate methods, if there are such things, for carrying that out. Okay, I get that. At the local level, I think the coverage was much more nuanced and personal. I mean, you heard from the journalists who were witnessing it, and you also heard a lot from family members of the victim of this guy, the guy who went through the heart attack and the suffering. I mean, she was basically tortured, beaten, and then buried alive, and so I understand that you wouldn't focus on those aspects as much in an international or national look at this, but that has a place in the storytelling too, I think.
And I also think part of the story that really needs to be looked at, and it is being looked at on these statewide levels in the states where you do have capital punishment, where you use the drug cocktail, is the issue of where are they getting the drugs from, and the fact that you have pharmacies now that aren't doing it. You have pharmaceutical companies that aren't producing the drugs that we were using previously in terms of execution. So
which is a hot button issue right now in the state of Missouri.
Exactly. And what's happening is that those who are against the death penalty are going after the drug makers and forcing them not to produce the drugs. And now you have states that are basically running around trying to find drugs wherever they can, and they're not sure what they're getting, and none of it's licensed. And that's creating a serious problem at the state level with those who are saying we still want to have these executions, find a way to make it happen.
I think the other thing that's really interesting is that, for years now, when there have been executions in death penalty states, there have been witnesses. Sometimes state law mandates it. Sometimes the prison system wants to allow families to be there. Mm-hmm. Journalists sometimes are required or allowed to be there. If the journalists and families had not been there witnessing this story would certainly not have taken on the magnitude that it did.
And I think what the public needs to understand is that when you execute someone, you're putting someone to death. There is no easy way around that. You can't, the whole process or the whole thought process of, well, they're going to go to sleep and then they're going to die. It doesn't really work that way. And I think we need to sort of move past that and let the public know when you put someone to death, it is a heinous act, either by the state or by anyone else.
The next scheduled execution here in Missouri is scheduled for 2 weeks from today. Russell Becklow is scheduled to be executed, like I said, 2 weeks from today for the 1996 murder of Michael Sanders. How do you see the local or statewide coverage either changing or evolving based on what we saw last week in Oklahoma?
I think a lot of it is going to go to what drugs are they using, and whether or not those drugs are going to be able to do the job the way it had been done previously. And if there's any inkling that that's not going to be the case, you're probably going to see a stay of execution. Right.